In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at proper spacing of a set of costume Mandalorian armor chest plates, as if you were applying for membership in the Mandalorian Mercs Costume Club. We're just going to go over some of the fine points and look at the various places where spacing usually pops up as a problem. So as you can see, we're going to be using a set of 3mm PVC, expanded PVC foam board armor. This is also known commercially as Sintra. It's very easy to form. The formability is very high. Just have to apply some heat and it's ready to go. So we're going to be using this because it's what I have easily available, and it constitutes a vast majority of the materials that costume Mandalorian armor sets are made out of. One of the first rules of spacing, and probably the oldest rule of spacing between armor, is the rule of thumbs. Okay, so the rule of thumbs, it's actually a rule that myself and one of the first personnel officers of MMCC came up with, and basically what it says is if you can fit the end of your thumb between these areas, then the spacing is probably correct, is pretty would be proportional all the way around. So that's where we came up with this. There's, if you look at the quote-unquote canon of Mandalorian armor that exists, that would be between the actual what's considered canon between movies and televisions, and maybe television shows, cartoons, and maybe the newer comics, and then legends. It's pretty standard as far as how spacing is done on a Mandalorian kit, and most of it either there's a very small amount of gappage, what I like to call the Jango Fett style, because Jango's armor has a little more gap than Boba's. Boba's armor is very closed up, so there's not much gap. In fact, these pieces fit almost right against each other, right at the chest diamond area. So the big things that you really want to watch out for is your spacing here between the chest plate and the collar plate. You want to make sure that you have enough spacing so that it's not too, you don't want too much spacing. You really want to observe that thumb rule, and my thumb easily fits in between there, as you can see. Easily fits in between there. But it also, the armor does not touch on the corners. I'm going to move this piece just so you can see. It's also not touching. So the armor, the top corner of the chest plate does not touch the bottom outside corner of the collar plate. Same over here. So it's very important that these two corners, these two outside corners, do not touch. You need to give these at least 1/4 of an inch spacing. Now, again, as you move these pieces, you're going to be careful not to widen the gap here. You really don't want to widen this gap. That's going to cause you a lot of problems. The other thing is the diamond area. This is another space to be mindful of. Now, I don't have a diamond put in there, but you want to try to get that diamond perfectly centered in the cutout area. It's very important to have that diamond centered, because if it drifts from one side or the other, and you're applying for official membership in the Mandalorian Mercs, they will call it that. They will probably give you at least a suggestion to say, hey, fix the spacing on your, or at least address at some point the spacing on your chest diamond. I think it's probably a little more minor nowadays than it used to be, but either way, it's very important to make sure that your spacing is proper in here. And then, of course, we have the gut plate, which the gut plate can be a little bit difficult because it is a fairly wide piece, and these two chest plates, what I call the dog leg, also some people call them the fang, they tend to taper in as you manipulate and form these plates with heat. These fangs will actually sort of taper in with the shape of your body, so they kind of close up and they make it difficult for the gut plate to fit in properly. So you probably will have to do a little bit of sanding on your gut plate to get it to fit right. But either way, you always want to make sure that your spacing here also is proportional. Now, if you really don't want it, I don't like a gut plate riding right up against here. I like, again, having that thumb space in there. That's important. But you also want to make sure that you have plenty of space here in this area where the dog leg or the fang points down to the tab. There's this tab on the side. So you want to make sure that you have enough spacing here so that those two pieces aren't hitting together either. So a lot of it is just playing with your spacing and positioning plates to get a proper alignment to where all the spacing is, again, it's all proportional. Now, these tabs are meant to actually carry on this outside line of the fang. So if in this case, and you probably will run into this problem, once you set up your chest plates and get those in the right position, a lot of times the tabs on your plate need to be trimmed. So it's always a good idea to just, what I do is I just grab a ruler and grab a pencil, and without moving the plate, I make sure I get it centered properly, just like that. And of course, you can use this, you want to use the point of the plate here as sort of a guide to centering it. Then I'll take my ruler and I'll let my ruler follow along this edge here, and I'll just mark this for clipping. I'll do the same on this side. I'll let my ruler follow the edge of the chest plate. And then I marked it for clipping. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to cut this, move this over a little bit. Take your time. I have a razor knife here that I use, and I just go real slow. Kids do not do this without a parent's supervision. And then, of course, the center just snaps off. We're going to do this side. And you just want to work this till it pops right off, just like that. Now you may have to do just a spot of cleanup along the edge here, which you can do like that. Same over here. And now we can put our gut plate on. And it follows that taper all the way down. So it ends up looking very, very nice, very industrial. It has that nice line that goes down on each side. So it's all moving in one fluid direction, just like good Mandalorian armor should look. And again, you want to make sure that down here at these corners are just as important as these corners up here. So you don't want the armor to touch each other. You want there to be enough space between these 2 points. And right here, it gets very close in this area here on the inside edge of the dog leg and the outside upper edge of the gut plate. You really want to watch those areas as well, and make sure that you're spacing, that you have enough space so that there's some gap. So this would be a properly spaced and properly lined set of armor. Again, all the space is proportional. You can put your thumb in up here. You can put your thumb in down here. And of course, your area for your chest diamond, both sets of tabs are evenly spaced. That's a good way to tell if your chest diamond is going to be centered properly. Is look at the gappage, the gap here between the two chest plates, and I like to kind of push it down just to see how it's going to look. But these gaps are fairly, are pretty equal. This gap here may be slightly closer. If we measure it, we get around, from corner to corner, 1, 2, looks like 3/8 there, and 3/8 there. So that's actually equal. I mean, those are perfectly even, and that's what you want. Now, one thing to take in mind also is that you're going to have to sand the edges of these plates after you've cut them out to prep them for wearing. You're going to want to round these edges so that they're not sharp. You may have some little straggly edges like this, so you're going to still do some trimming and some sanding. So my recommendation there is to do all of your trimming and sanding before you get involved in trying to get your armor appropriately spaced. Because if you don't, and you get everything spaced the way you feel it needs to be spaced, you do a bunch of sanding and a bunch of trimming, you're going to come back and you're going to have problems getting it to sit properly and be properly spaced. So do all of your finishing work first, and then come back and check out your spacing. Because if you do it too early, you're just going to get, I think you're going to get, at least in my experience, your spacing tends to be off. Now, one thing that you also want to do is, and this is correlating to your sizing, okay? So right here, between your chest and your collar plate, your chest plates are actually allowed to stick out a little bit past the collar plate, but not by much. So you don't want a chest plate, sticking out like right here. That's just way too far. You've got to make sure that your chest plates are horizontally aligned to try to get them as close to this corner here as possible without going too far over. Now, I get it if you're using larger plates. Sometimes those can be a little bit difficult to properly space out just because they're so large. So my advice there is trim some from the outside. Never trim from the inside. If you have to trim a plate down to get the proper spacing and the proper sizing, always trim from the outside edge, because this is a much easier part to trim from and still keep the standard look that you're going for. If you start trimming in here where these tabs are, well, now you've got to continue these tabs. It's kind of complex in here. Okay, don't go for this side. Go for the outside. If there's any trimming that needs to be done, it's always best to trim from the outside, not from the inside. Same goes for the gut plate. On this gut plate, even though this is the same size gut plate originally that went with this is the 5/7 Mandalorian armor patterns are scaled to your height, and these plates actually go with this tape cast, 5 feet 7 inches. The problem is, on the tape cast, once I have the plates molded and sitting properly, the gut plate is too big. There's no way to really get it to sit there without making the plates, without making them so out of spacing specs that's just ridiculous. So you are going to have to alter the plates to get, sometimes, I would say in a lot of times, you're going to have to alter the standard plates to make sure that the spacing is correct. Don't be afraid to do that. But again, you want to, if you're going to sand from this side, these corners, right? These edges, I should say. Sand these edges, which would be the top edges, the rounded area of the gut plate. Don't worry about the bottom, okay? Don't worry about the bottom here. Worry about the top and sanding these areas, because this is the part that actually has to be properly spaced between the chest plates, not what's down here at the bottom. What's down here at the bottom just has to be, at a certain point above the girth belt. So worry about here, don't worry about here. And that's basically it for spacing out a set of costume Mandalorian armor. It's not that difficult. The main thing is, of course, getting those thumb spaces in. The thumb spacing is, in my opinion, is probably the most important thing that's really lasted for the last, I'd say, 11 of our 12 years in existence. That's probably been our hallmark for spacing of plates, is that thumb space. So you really have to use that, and it's a great reference tool for how well your plates are spaced. So hopefully this tutorial is helpful for you getting your plate spaced correctly so you can join the Mando Mercs Costume Club, or even if you don't want to and you just want to wear a really cool set of Mandalorian armor, it's always cooler when it's spaced nicely. So hopefully this helps you, and we'll see you next month in the Warmaster's Workshop.